Welcome to the Sophonaut podcast, Thought Crimes. On Thought Crimes, we discuss the hardest parts of our behavior with the most insightful guests to deliver tactics to take control of our behavior and our lives.
Wow.
On this show, we cover burnout, personality, sleep, neuroticism, and more. For this episode, once again, our guests are us, the co-founders of Sophonaut. So I am Peter DePaulo.
Hey, and I'm Tyler Capps.
And thank you, Tyler, for joining us. You're actually a special guest. Tyler just had a baby, and he is dealing with the baby forming its personality currently in the first few days of its life.
He has a loud one.
What are you doing?
I know.
Yeah, that's good. So just jumping right into it, today the theme of the episode, the conversation of the episode is what do I do with the information I could get about my personality. And so just for information, we provide an assessment. You're welcome to go check it out at beyondyou.org/test or sophonaut.com. I'm not plugging that right now. I'm just putting it out there in case you get curious while we're talking. But there are many personality assessments out there, and most of them are personality type assessments. And a very common thing that we hear from clients, friends, and people in our community is, okay, great. I took this thing. I got these results. What do I do? So, Tyler, what would be the first thing that you would say if someone just comes with this open-ended question? Hey, Tyler, I got my results. I took an Enneagram test. What do I do?
What do I do? Actually read the results, I would say, is a good starting point. A lot of people get overwhelmed when they see just a massive amount of text and then they just close it because they just see their high level scores and think that's enough. But that's not, in my experience, that's never been enough to actually stick with someone and give them anything useful to intuit about their lives. So even if it's just the header and then of whatever the trait is or your type, starting there to try to get a base understanding of what it's all about.
Yeah.
And if they have any recommendations, even if you think it's a bunch of hooey, read it so you can test whether or not it is.
Yeah, that's good advice. It's basically it's pretty safe advice too. Read the results that you've got after you invested all that time taking your whatever assessment you've taken. Without dishing on any other assessments or overly promoting ours, I'll definitely say one approach I would recommend is, in the vein of reading your results, is start with a high level understanding first. It's really easy, depending on which assessment you take, to go and focus on this. This is something we see all the time. People jump right into the negative. So one of the outputs of our test is neuroticism. And people want to know, any content we've ever made about neuroticism basically goes outperforms everything else by a lot. It tells you something about people's personalities, which is what we're talking about. But one of the things is, I would recommend, if you're orienting yourself to your results, reading them all, great advice. Also, try to start from the high level, right? The strategy for reading your results could be just let's do one layer of paint in the broadest way possible. You're just looking at essentially overall, what does this mean? Right. So that's another component of this.
I guess, maybe a metaphorical way to think about it is understand what you're about to be trying to more deeply understand. Switch your radar on by reading the short, one sentence summary of each of these traits or whatever they happen to be. So then as you're going throughout your daily life, you can actually start to see things through those lenses and connect dots that are more applicable to you.
Not to get too meta, but one thing I was thinking about, and we've even talked about this a while ago, not recently, is how much do you think you could, if you're sitting next to somebody, how much could you predict how they would interact with their results based on you looking at their results? Because you're very familiar with these. We're both experts in this now.
So if I got to see their results before they did?
Yeah, pretty much. You see their results and then you watch them interact with them. How much could you predict about how they'd interact with them?
There are some, yes. I think you could predict maybe 75% of it.
Yeah.
There's some things that are universally attractive in a way, whether it's a positive or a negative attraction. It like draws people and they want to know how they scored on it.
Mm-hmm.
And just so they can agree or disagree with it, it doesn't matter. That's kind of universal. But then based on the specific results, you can tell some are going to be much more sensitive to what could be interpreted as negative feedback,
right?
As opposed to using it as a tool for growth. So like
right.
your ability to use a growth tool for growth can be predicted by the growth tool.
Yes. What a mind-blowing revelation. When you say it like that, it sounds so obvious, but I want to kind of sit in that, which is if you're using a personal growth tool that's reliable and valid, it can be used to predict basically the direction of your growth.
Yes.
Which is like as it should be. One really funny thing I've recently got, lots of people have been taking our assessment, which is great. Thanks, guys. Keep doing it. We're keeping up. The servers are getting pummeled, but that's a happy problem to have. And one of the things that I have heard from people at least in my immediate sphere, is this is wrong. That's like something I'm like, okay, cool. When I ask why, almost every single time, and no offense if you are looking at your results in some assessment and you're like, this is totally wrong. I'm not trying to trigger you, and I'm not trying to be combative, right? I'm not trying to make you feel bad. But what my experience has been with, now over 1,000 test takers, and like a subset of them I've been able to interview, I think there has only been one case in which I have been convinced that the results were invalid and that the person should retest. One case. Everyone else, through asking them questions, expresses essentially the truth that they've faced, that they found uncomfortable, in their own words.
Yeah.
And that's the weirdest thing for me, because when people first started disagreeing, I would take it at face value and go, oh, no, I guess our assessment is not as accurate as I thought. Let me hear this person out. And I hear them out. I'm like, so it sounds like you're saying in different words, the words that are written on the page are true. And they're like, well, yeah, when you put it that way, yes. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. Maybe taking it back to like your original question of what's the first step people should do when interacting with their results is, before they interact with it, get themselves in a more of a absorbing and willing mindset, because it's almost an immune, psychological immune response to be told what could be negative qualities about yourself. So our initial reaction is like, this must be wrong because I don't have negative qualities.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's the initial reaction for me, I'm guessing most people. But if you truly want to grow, often you have to face those things that are in your way of growth, which are the things you tend to not want to hear about yourself.
Great. Okay. So we kind of have now what to do with my results. We're not even to like the actual execution of like some new behavior. It's really like, this is interesting, right? We've already spent a lot of time talking about preparing yourself for accepting the results. Number one, read it all, right? Most people don't. That's okay. That's why we're like working with individuals directly, but read it all, right? Number two, though, before you read it all, prepare yourself, put yourself in a receptive state. Actually, I recently just listened to a podcast, different podcast, that was talking about how to essentially change other people's minds. It's like, how do you convince people of things? And most of it, this entire book this guy wrote was basically about your side of the street. It's not actually about changing them. It's about being curious and receptive. So if you're trying to change your own mind, like you're trying to grow, right? If you're here, if you're listening to this, you're certainly trying to grow in some way. I think just from self-selection, you're probably trying to grow in some way, whether it's in your career or health or wealth or happiness, whatever. And great, welcome. I hope you're enjoying this. In order to grow, you have to be uncomfortable. Like everybody knows this, but when they feel uncomfortable, they hate it. I hate it. I hate feeling uncomfortable. And like you have to kind of twist your own brain into this weird, like almost like psychologically masochistic thing, what you said, right? Like this immune response is actually a hint that you're growing, right?
Yeah.
It's actually like an indicator that something that you're doing is moving you towards, you know, expansion because you feel uncomfortable. So, yeah, that's
But
interesting.
I guess a way to help with that discomfort is let yourself know it's going to be uncomfortable, right? Like
Yes.
surprise discomfort always hits 10 times harder. Like even
Yes.
just going for a walk today, it's winter, deep winter right now, and it's icy and windy. But I saw that before going outside. I was like, oh, it's gonna be cold.
Yeah.
And when I went outside, I was like, I took it in stride versus like an hour earlier. I went outside and was surprised by it and just like freaked out a little bit. Same thing with just hearing feedback about yourself.
The research supports you like a lot in this. I can't remember the exact study, but there were a few where essentially people who knew there was going to be a shock felt less pain than people who didn't.
Yeah.
Something about the certainty of a bad experience makes it less painful. So one other thing I wanted to add around preparing yourself for the results. So we have two themes so far, and what do I do with my results? Right. Number one, read them. Number two, maybe this is number one, right? Before you read them, prepare yourself. How can you prepare yourself? Know that some of it's not going to be pleasant, right? Know that some of it's going to be hard truths. And also know that when you are facing hard truths, that's where you can do the most growth. And the last piece of this I want to add is if you have a mindset of curiosity, it is much easier to not take things personally because you can interrogate anything. It's like, I'm going to interrogate, like, I'll just use myself as an example. Like, if someone says you're a jerk, maybe I could get mad and say, no, you're a jerk. But if I'm curious, it's like I have this armor that doesn't like reflect back immediately. I go, am I a jerk?
Take out your pen and pad and say, tell me exactly how I'm a jerk.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I'm not saying do this in every case, and I'm not a Zen master or anything, but the idea that I could have the shield of curiosity as this non-violent response to like my own discomfort is really powerful. Right. And so that's something to do if you're going into your results. You know, you're wear the shield of curiosity, and the secret is that curiosity is actually taking off all of your armor and knowing you can't get hurt. So yeah, that's the next component. Okay, we've talked a lot about what to do like the immediate moment you get your results. Let's dig into like some stuff of what to look for in your personality. And again, I'm trying to speak about this not from just our scope. Obviously, we believe our assessment's the best. We're biased, but we're also smart. So, you know, maybe it is. But if you're just looking at any personality results or personality type results, or like maybe your astrology chart, whatever it is, right? Non-judgmentally, if you're approaching it and you have this information, you read it all, you received it, how do I orient myself to this of like, what should I focus on next? What can I do with it? Like what should I start working on? What should I start untangling in these results?
Yeah. I guess if you took the test with growth in mind, you probably had a specific avenue that you had picked out just to like test it with. So whether it's like relationships, physical health, financial success, you probably had something in mind. And the easiest example for us to use is always like exercise. So if you have your results and you're like, okay, I've always tried dieting or starting an exercise and wanting to get fit. How can I apply these results to that? So basically do a case study, like pick an example in your life that you want to test this on and actually give it the old college try. So if you're trying to exercise more and it's always been infrequent and then you would go for like weeks without exercising, it's going to be in your results why that is, right? Like if you can map how you tried before and what your behavioral tendencies are, like typically they'll tell you the good things about you, like why this tendency kicks butt and why it's really good for you or how it could hold you back, mapping those to your failure mode. And if you say you weren't using your strengths, that might be the answer you've been looking for, and just give that a try going forward.
So let me summarize and add, yes, and if you will, which is you have an avenue into this already, right? Like, oh, and I love this. I love this because I find myself, just to comment on this for a second, and then I'll get into what I was saying, is I find myself frustrated a lot of the time when people ask me something like, well, like, what do I do with this? Because it's usually like, what do you want to do? That's my response, right? And I think some people, not everybody, some people want me to tell them what they want. And I'm like, I can't exactly. I can help you if we're going back that far. I can orient you towards things that make you feel fulfillment, feel good, feel happy, and then you've got to pick something there. And the theme in this is what I call self-reliance, right? Like actually, well, what Ralph Waldo Emerson calls self-reliance. I made a video on it a while ago. I don't know if it's still published somewhere. And self-reliance is a necessary component of growth. And if you have that mindset when you go into your results, they're super duper powerful, because now you're like, I already had my canoe. I already knew which river I wanted to ford. I wanted to go down this river and figure out what's around the corner. And now I've got a map and a compass. Like before, I just had the wilds, right, of my own mind. The river represents your mind, right? The canoe is like your consciousness navigating your own mind, right? Now you've got a map. And it's not like the best map in the world, but it's better than no map. That's the crazy thing.
Yeah.
So to dig into the actual thing, though, is you pick an avenue, right? You already have one. And this is another thing which I really am excited about, which is try it yourself. That's the first thing that you said, Tyler. Try it. You don't have to trust that the science, you never have to believe in science. You can try science out again, right? Like, it's not a belief system. It's a method. So you can try it on your own life as a case study. You don't need to trust us in any way. It's like, if you map the component that you're working on to something in your results, like whatever it is, and it works, then that would be validity that the results are real and valid. I mean, it's like well, I'm kind of snake eating its own tail here, but like it's like testing it in a use case in which who had already thought is probably the first thing you should do, picking just one little component of your results. That's what I'm hearing from what you're saying.
Yes, exactly. And trying to summarize and combine sounds like coming to this tool with intention will make it extremely more useful. It's like the same. I think some people take these tests as like a fun thing to do with no explicit intention other than maybe to feel good at the end of it. And that's why they get upset and say it's wrong when the results tell them something they don't like about themselves. It's the same thing as being given, like, you're just standing in a field, just like hanging out with some people, and someone hands you a hammer. You're not just going to go start banging stuff because you had no intention to use the hammer, right? You're just going to be like, thanks, and then set it down.
I don't know what friends you're hanging out with, but me and my friends would definitely start hitting stuff with a hammer if we had a hammer in the field.
But yeah, the point was that, like, it's a tool, right? I think part of the process is recontextualizing the point of this in your mind. Again, like, if you have desire to grow, it's an extremely powerful tool to help you in that growth. It's not just a fun game to play. Right. So it's the setting an intention and coming to it with a mindset of applying it in a way that'll benefit you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Not everything is a nail. Not everything is a hammer. A hammer is useful when you see a nail, not the other way around, right? That's like to make the metaphor tired. But that's great. Okay. And so you have this avenue. You maybe we can get even more specific, actually, right? Like, so like we're talking about working out, and this is where it's really hard to give generic information about it, because if you have your own, which is kind of what I want to do, because it's like, if we can pull out the generic stuff and say, like, this is the pattern to match in when you're going into your specific results, then you have like even better information that's like more applicable. It's like, what's the pattern that everybody has to follow into this when you have your results? So you have an avenue, maybe it's fitness. You want to get fit. Interrogating your intention is actually useful as well. So it's like actually a lot of this work is on your side before you even take the test. Even after taking the test, a lot of the work is still on your side of like what you do with it, right? Now we're getting into this like macro theme of that. whole self-reliance thing. It's like, you can rely on yourself. You can. And people think that they are, and they are not. And that's really sad to me. It's like unfulfilled potential is largely people who haven't just tried to see what they can do and been like, oh, wow, I can do much more than I thought. That's one of the coolest experiences to witness, is when someone surprises themselves with their capabilities.
Yeah. But yeah, so taking it from the generic to the specific, which is, I guess, what we're also working towards in our application. But for the exercise application, some people are extremely consistent as just general individuals. So that's part of conscientiousness in the Big Five model, which you can learn more about in our previous podcast. But so for them, they will follow a schedule. And if they say they're going to set their alarm at a certain time of day, they'll just get up and do the things they said they'll do. They'll go to the gym. It may not be a exciting or like fulfilling workout, but they will get the workout. Yes. And then, but on the other hand, say you're lower in that, and you're not like getting up every day at that time. I like just to do it when it fits in. You're probably more open to experience maybe lower in this orderliness and planning mode. Mm-hmm. So you might also want to need variety. You're not just going to go lift weights or run on the treadmill every day. And maybe that was the failure mode, right? As everyone was telling you, to lose weight, all you have to do is run every day. I was like, yeah, that's like eating oatmeal with water and no sugar. It just hurts my soul.
Oh my gosh, that's so relatable. Someone told me they figured this out and they were able to use our model to map it only retroactively. And this was someone we coached, which was I'll keep them anonymous. I'll try not even to use like their gender pronouns and just use they. So I'm just really anonymous. They said they had an idea of what it meant to go to the gym, and they were very high in openness. Mm-hmm. And they figured out that when they started doing what they wanted to do at the gym, with the emphasis on just being there, and I quote, it was super chill. And so they had, which is illuminating of like, you can already start to piece together what their personality is if you clue into what people value. I value chillness at the gym. Me personally, I do not value chillness at the gym. That's not why I go there. It's like the opposite. It's really intense and hard and like a challenge. And like, I'm always talking to people, right? They were like, I didn't have to talk to anybody. I could do exactly what I wanted to do. And then I could leave. And no one was looking at me. No one was like paying attention to me. I didn't have to lift heavy weights every time I went. It was like this entire different experience. And what's beautiful to me about that is it fit them better than it would have fit me. That's perfect. That means they were doing something that was explicitly and specifically right for them, which maybe might start to segue into like the next major point, right?
Yeah. Which I think we're connecting mentally at the same time. Is like a lot of people have preconceived notions based on what like quote unquote experts or super successful people that are either jacked or rich or look like they're just swimming in love say worked for them. But I did look at the numbers before this chat, and that they typically only speak to 3% of this personality population.
Whoa, so dude, we were way off. 3%?
Yeah. If you're exactly like them, there's a hyper successful archetype, and it's quite consistent across most of the people you'll see in mainstream media. They tend to fit in to this like 3% bucket.
Man.
With slight variance, but basically most of us are in the 90%, the 97%, right? So we need to find the guru, or mash up maybe like 10 different gurus and take a bite of them, like a larger portion of another one, and put it together to give us like the true advice we need. And that's what diligent and like well-serving applications should do.
Wow. That blows my mind. So it's 3% of that, but it makes perfect sense also, actually. As soon as I start to untangle it, I'm like, right.
Yeah. It's like, if you know David Goggins, he's also like the extreme of the extreme, and like conscientiousness specifically. Yes. He's a Navy SEAL that just he does ultra marathons, and he's just extreme in all the ways. If he's going to do something, he'll do it to the maximum. He is one archetype, and he has a large platform for trying to get people to be successful. But he's speaking to himself.
Yes.
Right. Like if you don't match with that, like his behavioral tendencies, you're going to say, oh, why does it work for him and not me? I must be the failure.
Yeah.
But the problem is the advice is the failure. It's not matched to your success patterns.
Right. Right. And just to crystallize that thought, right? So, you know, to summarize what we've covered so far, right? So read your results, prepare yourself before you do, come with intention, run a case study with that intent, like on your intention. Maybe it's to work out, maybe it's to eat healthy, have better relationships. There will be information in your results that'll tie into that intention. And now we're getting into this, don't listen too much to experts. That's how I'd summarize it. And a better way of saying it on the positive is trust yourself first, then go seek the actual way to do something. And so it's like you have this intention, this is your angle in. If you're going to keep fording that river, if we're going to stick with that metaphor, you're going down this river and maybe there's rapids ahead, right? Don't just go looking for generic expert advice on, you know, river rafting. You need to match the river that you're in, right? With someone else's. Another
get a guide local to your behavioral patterns.
Yeah, get a guide local to your behavioral patterns. Another thing that I was talking to a friend about is the way I think about it when people are like, well, how could this is another criticism I run into. People are like, well, it feels wrong because I don't like the way it makes me feel. And how do you know that it's actually applicable to me since it's like based on self-reporting? All of these assessments are all based on self-reporting, right? So now you have to interrogate, without getting into the science, you have to interrogate like every component of the self-reporting, the calculation, and then the actual like consumption of the results to validate this for yourself. I recommend doing that with anything that you're doing. If you're a nerd like us, go and like interrogate what you do and actually like validate it and make sure like what you believe is true. That's good generic advice. I think that's about as generic as advice for everybody that you could possibly have, is like, make sure that what you believe is true. But anyways, people will say like, how do you know something about me and with what certainty? And the metaphor I gave my friend was, imagine there are 32 lanes of traffic. And that's all I know. There are 32 lanes of traffic. You're in the furthest left lane, and where you want to go is all the way on the furthest right lane. That means you have to make 31 lane changes just to get over there if you want to express that kind of behavior. If you know that, then the actual like validity, if you're starting at a really high level, is super obvious. And it's like, that's easy to understand. It's like there are 32 lanes. Yeah, maybe there are some that are really close to each other. Just to get into it, like there are two archetypes I see a lot in my life. It turns out a lot of my friends are innovators or mavericks. They're only one bit away from each other. And whether they're calm or reactive, what does that mean? A maverick is somebody who's really open and really extroverted. That's like their biggest like external attributes. An innovator is really open and extroverted, and they're also, like David Goggins, highly conscientious. And so that's kind of the difference. Innovators and mavericks are in the same realm. They're the people who are like constantly doing crazy things. They're the people who like get a wild hair and go do triathlons like with limited training. That's probably more the innovator than the maverick. Maverick probably wouldn't make it to the triathlon because they wouldn't stick with the program unless they really wanted to. And so those two lanes are all, let's just say, those are the far two left lanes. And then all the way on the other side, you might have like a mechanic or an astronaut who are like opposites. No, actually, it would literally be, those would be the far left and the far right. But I don't want to get into too much technical stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Let's just say captain. Captain is similar, but like further. It's like a middle lane. If you meet somebody who's like in the far left lane, they're a maverick and it's really clear, right? And then you meet someone who's a captain, you have these really easy to determine like amount of changes they would have to make and the nature of changes they would have to make in order to accomplish something that they want to accomplish. And so this one's hard to generalize because I can tell you, if I know what your results are, what lane you're in. but I don't necessarily know like what to do with that unless you say where you want to go. It's like the quote from Alice in Wonderland, which is Alice runs into the Cheshire Cat. If you guys aren't familiar with Alice in Wonderland, I mean, everyone's pretty much familiar with it, right? Okay.
Make assume that one.
Yeah, okay, let's assume that one, right? So yeah, Alice runs into the Cheshire Cat and she says, I'm lost. Can you help me? And the Cheshire Cat says, where do you want to go? And Alice says, I don't know. And then he says, well, how do you know you're lost then? Which is like, whoa, that's deep for a kid's book, right? But it's kind of the same conversation where like I'm playing the Cheshire Cat a lot of the time, but even though people might not know where they want to go, I'll be like, well, I know what lane you're in, so let's start there. Like you're in the 3rd lane. If you're trying to get over to the David Goggins lane where you're like running triathlons every weekend or whatever, right? Like this guy is like a super marathoner, hardcore dude. He needs the traffic, so it's good that we're gonna give him a good shout out on our major syndicate publication. But it's really, really clear to see the gap. And I think that is like, I'm not even sure if there's a theme in here. I just kind of went off on this idea of like the relative differences between people on a high enough macro scale are really clear. They're really easy to see. And it's really easy to say to someone specifically what direction you should go based on what lane you're in. But look at the elements you need. You kind of want to know like roughly where you want to head and where you've been. So like you have to organize these components.
You can get one step backwards either by going all the way around the world, like walking forwards, or taking a step back.
Yeah.
And that's just like, that's the difference of knowing where you want to go and then also having a tool that tells you how to get there. Right? Like you can take forever, you may still end up getting there. It just might be a lot more painful and take a lot longer.
Right.
Yeah. I think another way to say it and keeping it general is it's a style finder, right? Like we a lot of us have very similar like high level goals in our life. But how we get there is very unique to our style. So like throwing out the word behavioral tendencies, like we all just have, like you say, like, oh, that guy's got style. That this just means like he stands out in his way or she stands out in her way, right? It's the same with like your behavioral tendencies or your behavioral styles. Like people are like quote unquote quirky. That's just like their unique combination of all these little traits that put them in their lane.
Yeah. There's also, I mean, when you see two people who are far apart in lanes, like the magnitude is like, you can feel it. You know, there's people who are really high in extroversion. They're like, they'll talk to everybody in an airport. That's like the one I always think is like, they're just always just like, hey, what's up? How's it going? Right. The irony of this is I used to think I wasn't that guy. Like I was like, oh man, I see that guy talking to the flight attendant. I'm like, oh, they're really extroverted. And then I was like, wait, I just talked to literally every single
as person. You're talking to random people in line about it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like talking about that extrovert over there. I'm like, oh, I'm that extrovert over here. One really funny thing, this is just like an anecdote on style, is to use the lane metaphor, I used to think I was cooler than I actually am. Like aspirationally cool.
Don't we all?
Right? But I got to meet like somebody who was the coolest person, maybe I think ever, which is RZA from the Wu-Tang Clan. And being in his presence, like hearing him talk, his style, his utter coolness that just diffuses from his person was like overwhelming. I was like, now that I have seen the relative difference in coolness of me, a mere mortal in coolness, compared to RZA of the Wu-Tang Clan, a man notoriously cool, I was just like, I don't hold a candle to it. And so the reason I bring this up is not to humble brag about how I met RZA, which I am now actively bragging
Isn't it,
about.
Though?
Yeah, no. It's to show that like sometimes when you're orienting yourself with these results, by the way, I met RZA from the Wu-Tang Clan on record. No, it's when you're orienting yourself, I think, and this is kind of what I'm getting at with the lanes and kind of what you're getting at with the whole style is magnitude of style it's actually measurable. And like the way that we're talking about it is style, but it's your behavioral tendencies are actually measurable. And the magnitude between like large gaps is really easy to see. So I was talking about the Mavericks and the innovators all in one corner, right? But you have these folks way over on the other side of the spectrum, right? They're maybe the opposite. I don't remember like the opposites of those in particular off the top of my head. And you can feel the difference. That one is really, really like straightforward. As straightforward as if I was standing next to RZA, I would look like the biggest dork you've ever met. Cause who wouldn't, right? He's just so cool in the way he like holds himself and talks about things. And so similarly, like maybe you're not cool like me, you're not cool, but you are like the you factor that you have is like measurable in magnitude.
And to jump in on that, I would say he's probably just more authentically himself, which makes him appear more cool, right? Like there's different types of, like, you can't just pursue one specific, like, oh, this archetype is cool.
No,
it's when someone leans into themselves and is like not afraid to let it ooze out and diffuse in the room,
right?
Like, and not trying, like, when you said you thought you were cool, I'm betting you were trying to be something that was actually slightly out of your shape, right? Like I would say, like, my grandma's really cool because she goes no hoots and is authentically herself, and definitely not RZA, but she she diffuses herself in the room. She is a presence and authentically herself, and I think that's part of one of the benefits of like coming to these types of results with an open mind and curiosity, is like trying to just find who you are, hold your own candle to yourself, not holding your candle to who you think's the best.
Yeah, do you better than other people are doing them if you're looking at the competitive landscape.
Yeah.
If you're a competitive person. It's a good point. I will stand by the statement that I will never be as cool as RZA.
Yeah, I mean, that's still probably fair.
But that's something to work towards. Maybe one of my aspirations, maybe my intention is how can I hold my candle as well as RZA and your grandmother are holding their candles. Also, now I'm like, is there any universe in which we can get your grandma and RZA on this podcast at the same time? Can you imagine that?
If RZA, if you're listening, reach out. I got a close line of access to my grandma. We can make this happen.
Yeah, RZA, have your people reach out to our people, and we'll get this this interview underway. Cool. Well, we only have a few minutes left. Is there anything in particular? So remember, we're talking about orienting yourself in your personality results. So basically answering the question, what do you do with your personality when you know about it? Is there anything like that we really ought to cover that we've missed so far? And I can just round it up, right? So what we covered is read your results, prepare yourself for what you're reading, come with an intention. So pick an avenue, do a case study on your own life, meaning run your life through your results. You don't have to trust us. You don't have to trust any like assessment. You should be able to test it. Throw away your assumptions is how I would summarize it, right? Throw away your assumptions about experts or what you or that you should be as cool as RZA, right? And then know that where you are is in a position relative to everybody else, and that's totally fine. Your direction, then, if you're getting off the freeway in the metaphor of 32 lanes, you're going to have to maybe change more lanes than other people. Or if it's a river metaphor that we're using, find a local guide, right? Those are actually the same thing. What it means is go with your core tendencies first, then base behavior off of them rather than starting with the outside world first. So that's basically what we covered. What else are we missing when you're leveraging the most out of your results that you possibly could?
I mean, at this point, I think you're getting into the nitty gritty.
Yeah.
But the just to summarize your summary, have a hierarchy of importance in your life. I think is always good. And setting like an intention and making the intention aligned with those priorities. So I'm taking this test because I have these 5 goals in my life. Let's just say that the physical fitness thing, I want to get more healthy so I can live longer. that's why I'm taking the test. So having that intention before you take it, now you have a reason to look at your results, like that'll actually take you through it, and an easy plug and play application for testing those results, right? How can it make me more healthy?
Yeah.
What about me can get me into that lane?
Yeah, good summary. Yeah, that's a good summary. And also, one of the things that you said early on was some people take the assessment with the expectation it's going to make them feel good. And the irony is that it may not in the short term, right? That was always saying is using the discomfort as an indicator that maybe you're heading towards growth, right? Like, this is a very like, common phrase in like Tibetan Buddhism, but it's the lotus grows in mud. I just love that metaphor. There was another, it wasn't a podcast. It was an interview with this monk who's, been monking his whole life. And he was talking to children, and children ask such interesting questions. Like if you actually listen to kids, they're like sort of probing the like foundations of our world. And we become numb to them as adults, so we start to believe we know the answers to them. Like, for example, why is the sky blue? I bet you most people are like, yeah, I kind of know in the back of my head. They probably don't, because I've been asking people like a total prat. Do you know why the sky is blue? And it's like it almost like it's so fundamental and so omnipresent that people are like, yeah, of course I do. And then it's like, well, actually, the answer is extremely like physically complex.
Yeah. What if you came to yourself as a baby?
Yeah.
Asking yourself about yourself. That is what this test does, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Why did I do so well at this thing? Why did I do so poorly at this thing?
Yeah.
Just why yourself into the future. Like just go all day.
Yeah.
And you'll find core shaking and you'll resettle your foundation in a way that you can use it as a launching point to go where you need to go.
Absolutely. Yes. And that foundation can come out of mud, right? So to sort of finish on a quote from this monk was this little girl asks, what do I do to let my anger out? And he said, he was like, what makes you think that you need to let it out? Right? Like why is there an in? Why is there an out? Did the anger come from outside of you or did it start inside of you? And he, summarizing a long and very interesting philosophical talk he gave, the kind of conclusion he landed on was, he's like, your anger is part of the mud and there's probably something useful that can grow out of it. Right? There's probably a lotus that can bloom from the mud of your anger. It's like, it's so poetic and beautiful. And that's the same thing, right? It's like, you're a baby looking at this. The only reason that you're like, what I'm feeling about it is bad is because of your presumptions, your attitude about what you are and who you are. And so coming into your results, maybe the highest level to summarize both of what we're saying into one nice tied little bow is coming with an open mind is probably the best thing that you can do. Knowing that there is something in the future that will make you feel good on a long enough timeline if you continue growing towards it. Yeah. So that's like maybe not immediate, but long term, it will.
And there's a lot of research relating personality results with future outcomes. And quote one of the most monkey monks there is, if monkey is a way to describe someone monk-like, Yoda is nice. Fear leads to anger leads to hate leads to suffering. And fear and anger and hate can all actually be a part of like the same neural pathway associated with one of the personality traits. Maybe I'll leave it as a mystery for now so you can come back and learn more about it later. But that one is actually highly correlated with suffering. So Yoda was talking about personality before personality was a thing.
I think we'll leave it there. Thanks so much for taking the time to join me today, Tyler. I know you don't have that much time on your hands, and I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, likewise. It's not nice to get in a soundproof room for a moment.
And now we're going to play 30 minutes of crying baby noises.
Great. That's my thing.
You guys, thanks for listening to the Thought Crimes podcast. We'll see you every other week. I think on Wednesdays, but don't quote me. I forget the day that we publish. I want to shout out Chad Lamont and Christina Marini. I was about to use her pre-married name. What are those called?
Maiden.
Anyways, yeah, her maiden name. Christina Marini and Chad Lamont are the producer and editor of this podcast. They do a great job. So shouting them out. And thanks, Tyler. And thanks you
Peter.
to anyone. Oh, thanks, man. Thanks for thanking me. And enjoy. I'll catch you next time.
All right,
bye, guys.
Adios.